Hey guys, Jasmine here with the Academy of Animated Art doing the nightly shading and texture feedback. So, I've got two amazing submissions tonight to go over. Let's start off with Ashley here, who has a turntable. I love that you have a turntable. And I also enjoyed the back and forth on optimizing renders and getting iterations out quicker. It is like bold and a great learning experience too. And I have to say, you guys, I love this community. Excuse my voice. I love this community. It's so inspiring. Just go on and see you guys helping each other and learning from one another. Yeah, so keep it going. I'm always like, you guys don't need me. No, I'm kidding. So I am here to give you feedback. Ashley, I see you did some amazing updates here. I'm reading your notes. You turned down the spec inside the ear material, increasing roughness, and yes, that's completely working so much better. It doesn't feel like metallic-y anymore. You corrected the hair color and added spec. That, I will say, I'm liking the spec, but it's feeling a little washed out right now when I look at the turntable. Like I'm losing that richness in some of the areas of like a deeper brown. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, one, we can tighten up that speck a little bit, so that might help. But also, it would be great to see if you could, in the shading, have little bits of dark and variation, especially like kind of craft it if possible around where there would be I guess it would be like occlusion. I was actually thinking, would this be okay to achieve kind of like that contact with an occlusion pass in a composite? And yes, I think so. Like a lot of it will give it more depth, but as much as you can with kind of creating a little bit more depth in the hair. Actually, now that I'm seeing it turning, it's funny. This is the thing where you like see things. My first initial reaction was like, oh, it looks super washed out. And as I watch it more, I'm like, oh, maybe it's not washed out. But I always go with my instinct first because it's like when you keep on watching something, then other things pop up that, weren't as important. So I always go with my initial impression. My initial impression was it was washed out a little. So let's bring in that the deeper tones a little bit, tighten up that speck just slightly, and let's see if you can add some of that variation in the color map. And then, of course, I think the occlusion pass would help a lot as well with that. And you corrected the eye color and so much better. Let me go to actually your still to take a look at this. And oh, I thought I brought up your original, but I guess I didn't. I like the eye color a lot. One thing I will say, looking at this, especially from afar, is I feel like it's a little flat. Like I would love it if there was a little bit of almost like a darker blue. I'm gonna hack this really quickly. But like, let's say there was this like, just like a darker blue in here to give it a little bit more variation. And no, that's more periwinkle, but you know what I'm saying. It's like a darker shade. So especially when we zoom out, it doesn't feel so flat. So just me drawing that, maybe not right there, because then we lose some of the nice lightness of it, but it's kind of creating more of some variation. I actually looked up, I was looking at some eyes for you, and I think what you have the kind of the dark outline already, maybe accentuate that just a little bit more. And I guess what I'm looking for is like you see in some of these examples that, well, one, that's like that outline is pretty pronounced in almost all these eyes. And you also sometimes seeing in some of these eyes, like this is a good example where you have that darker outline, but I'm feeling there's a little bit more deeper tones in the blue eye. So I think if you add that here, it'll just give it that depth that it's like seeing it. You know, they say the eyes are the, what is it? The eyes are the window to the soul or something. I know I went way too deep there, but like, you know, I feel like if the eyes are the windows to the soul, like I want it to be deep and not so flat. And I feel like adding a deeper shade of like this aqua color there to add some variation will give it that. So I would play with that. Let me see the other things you did. You added the lip color, which I think makes a huge difference. What do you think? I think you did a great job with that. You boosted the shirt by the texture of the shirt by adding the some noise, and I like it. I think it's working really well. Let me look at the render. So this is where the renders help too, just to make sure it's not noisy. And it doesn't look noisy actually, but one thing I will say is I always like to do this, like bring down the bump by like half maybe, because it's like, especially when I talk to Dani, you'll see, but in the next person I'm speaking to, but it's like I do the same thing. You like really want to see the bump, but really if you look at bumps and texture, especially like shirts, they're super subtle in real life. So I always like pump it up, but then I bring it back to make it feel more realistic. This one maybe not half, maybe like a quarter back. But otherwise I think it's working really well. And the arms are looking so much better, and that's funny. Yeah, the shader wasn't applied. That happens to me all the time when I'm like, that doesn't look right, and then I realize there's like a generic Lambert shader attached to it, and I was like, yeah, that would explain that. And you buffed up the specs and the roughness on the boots. I think the boots are looking really nice. It's getting a nice sheen here. And then just to confirm that these are tights under here, right? And not skin. And if that's the case, that's totally cool. I just want to make sure that's not a mistaken skin thing. And it's smart to make it tights, because as you might have seen when she is animated in that wide shot, you do actually see under her skirt. So definitely better if they are tights. So overall, I think it's really close. It's coming along really well. Another thing I will say, just looking at it again, if you wanted, now this is aesthetics, if you wanted to tone down or like bring down this scarf color just a little bit, to also kind of create that depth in her, this is not necessary because I do like it, but if it was, maybe if there's some like variation in it, it will give it even more depth in the tones here, especially when it creases. And I don't think that should be a color thing, especially in the creases. I'm thinking more, sorry, I'm just thinking out loud. Almost like if you look at this material, sometimes I don't have your reference in front of you, but there's different colors attached to like the different fibers, and it feels like super organic and natural. I think that could be an interesting thing too, to kind of bring it to the next level and just add even more complexity and texture and shading to this. But overall, I think it's amazing, and especially you've come a long way, and I think you're nearly there. You should be really proud of it. So with that, let me know if you have any questions, and I'm loving this yellow skirt. Yellow is my favorite color. And I'm like, ooh, I kind of want that yellow skirt. But anyway, I can't wait to see the updates you come up with. So now let's move on to Dani. And I love your I hope you get hungry by looking at this. Funny story, I had this up on my screen, and my son, who's 2 years old, came up to my computer, and he was like distracted. All of a sudden he saw my computer screen. He's like, ooh, and he came like right up to it. And I was like, Mom, what is that? So you won my 2-year-old over. I was joking before, you would win my daughter over, who's 4 or 5, I should say. I forget her age. But anyway, big fan with the kids. So I'm liking the updates. I do have some questions. So I brought up your one before this just so I could compare. And I see one, I will say I really like the updates in the trunks here, especially this extra, oh, I missed the trunk. This detail right here compared to before. I'm feeling the spec, I'm getting that displacement going on, and I think you did an amazing job with that. And I see you reduced the spec in this guy too, which is working. I brought up the reference here that you had before just to take a look at it to see, to give me a gauge of like what I'm looking for. And when you're working, guys, I hope you always have your reference up because it makes so much of a difference when you can just see it side by side. And looking at this side by side, one, I think this is getting a little bit too blown out here. You want to watch out for that, especially if this key light is not too strong right now. It's the same key that's hitting these. You want to bring that down because otherwise when you're lighting this, you're going to find that this is blowing out pretty easily. So that I would bring down. And then one thing I would say is like, I kind of like how there's you see the like little strawberries in here with the little color, like the deeper tones of color. I think it'd be really great if you can introduce some of that in here organically. Give it a try. If it feels funny to you, you can nix it, but I think that would add a nice kind of detail there. And now going to these guys, so you did adjust both textures on here, I see, and they're definitely looking kind of velvety to me. I'm not sure what the material is on both of these. I think we kind of discussed, I've never seen reference for them. So I pulled up some reference of sprinkles specifically because I was like, okay, let's look at sprinkles first of all. And if you look at these sprinkles, they're very vibrant. They have a really tight specular to them. And the thing is, like here, these are just feeling all diffused and like blended into whatever material. It's kind of over whatever shading is on there. Properties is just overwhelming it. So one, you really want these sprinkles to pop out, and this I think is a great reference for it. And I'm not sure what this material under here is exactly, but as I was looking at this image, I was like, oh, it'd be kind of awesome if it was icing or something like that. And you can use this as reference to kind of have this kind of glossy kind of specular icing on here. I think that would be a nice feel for this tree here, but that's totally up to you. But the first thing is, I think we've gone too far with where it was. I feel like it was closer the last iteration, which is totally cool on both of those actually. And I do this all the time. This is what testing and everything's all about. Sometimes I joke that my first iteration's like the best one, and I just work it too hard. But this is all about testing. Like some of these things are working really well, like the trunks, and this guy is working better. But yeah, these I would kind of pull back to where you were, and then work on like this property. Like work on really getting that vibrancy in the sprinkles. And if you want to go with the icing texture, work on that, and I think it'll really stand out. And yes, you'll make me very hungry when I see it. Let's move on to your character, Mia. So that's your original one, or your one from the last one, and this is your new one. So I just wanted to take a look at the difference. And you did some awesome adjustments. I see you decided to change her ear colors a bit, and you made her skirt slightly darker, and her hair actually went brighter. I don't know if that was because it was specular. That's probably a specular thing, I assume. So one thing I will say is that it's kind of, I was mentioning this, I was looking at your style frame too, and I was talking about texture, like bump maps, and what I tend to do when I initially do a bump map is I'm like, awesome, I see it, it's there, and then I pull it back. And I think that's what I would recommend you doing now too, because I'm seeing some awesome textures that you put in the scarf, in the skirt, and in the boots, and in the ears right here. And I would pull that all back because especially in the skirt and the ears, it's definitely too strong. And then in the scarf, I would also say it's too strong too. So I'd pull that back. And then here, I'm not sure if this is the shininess material that I was kind of referring to here. And this is interesting. I would actually, this was where it'd be a good test to do a turntable to see how it reacts to light, because it's hard for me to see in just a still here. And then as far as the hair, I feel like it's gone a little bit too bright in the green. It's a little bit too fluorescenty. I liked it a little bit better before when it's kind of that darker tone. And if it's the specular doing that, then I would tighten up that specular highlight. So it's not giving it such a broad feel. Because if you're looking at your reference, like, see, she's getting that speck here, which is similar to this, but her other side is still keeping kind of like that deep tone, the deep tones and the greens. And that's a really nice variation in this reference. You know, she has different shades of green that goes throughout her hair, and I'd love to see that here. And overall, the eyes are better, for sure. I'm trying to look. Let's zoom in. Let's get that the outline in the eye, like the darker kind of outline that you see, a darker green in the eye. And did you enlarge the pupils? I think you might have enlarged the pupils, right? Because I'm looking at Ashley's Mia, and her pupils are smaller. So if you enlarged it intentionally, that's totally cool. I just like was looking at it, I was like, why don't I see that much of the iris? But yeah. And then if you are enlarging this, then when it comes to lighting, I definitely encourage like the ding lights and everything going on here to break it up. And I did mention this to Ashley too, but adding some color to the mouth, I think will be really beneficial, especially looking at your reference. She has like a definite, you don't have to go this far, but you know, she definitely has colored lips. And I kind of like these little rosy cheeks she has going on here. So if you want to add that to yours as well, I think that would be a nice touch. But anyway, I think it's looking great. And yeah, if you have any questions in the meantime, let me know. And I can't wait to see your updates. Now I have to stop looking at your stuff late at night because it just wants me to, it's kind of encouraging me to just go get ice cream right now. Okay. With that, I hope you're having a great day, night, morning, whenever you see this. And I can't wait to see your updates. Happy lighting!